listening to the Otasso Outdoors Podcast.
Wow. Direct eye contact.
Oh, I thought we were going to go.
No. What's up, guys? Welcome back to the Otasso Outdoors Podcast. I'm Caleb. I'm your host this evening, coming at you live from the Pod Bunker. I've got my two co-hosts. We've got Reed Robinson.
Howdy.
Hunter Grishke.
Hey,
If you guys are tuning in for the first time, you're likely to find one of three segments. Segment number one.
Segment number one is our Spotlight series. No. Segment number one is What You Got, Buddy? I got to get the order right here. What You Got, Buddy is where we bring pre-prepared articles that nobody else knows about. We present them to each other, and then we dive deep into every rabbit hole and possibility of conversation that they could bring up. Segment number two.
segment number two is our Spotlight series,
There you
where
go.
we bring awesome people on, interview them, learn all about them, and yeah.
Segment number three is our head-to-head series. That's where we bring some pre-prepared questions. One person's the game czar, and the other members of the Pod Bunker go head-to-head in our trivia/game show. It's a pretty good time. We did one recently with Dan Cook with Expedition Detroit.
He kicked my
He
butt.
absolutely wiped the floor, and Reed is no longer...
I wouldn't say wiped, but in my defense, he is a lawyer, so I would expect him to win.
So, guys, you clicked on it today. You know what it is. We're really excited because this actually is our first official Zoom call podcast. We actually haven't done one of these before, so this was very foreign terrain to navigate through. But live in the Pod Bunker, but also in Oklahoma, is Conner with Great Lakes Guided Outdoors. Welcome.
Hey guys, thanks for the warm welcome. I'm very glad we could make it work with everybody's busy schedules and being over 1,000 miles apart. So I look forward to it.
Dude, technology makes stuff like this so much more fun.
Connor, we were trying to figure it out earlier. Do you pronounce your last name Go?
That would be incorrect. It's pronounced like cough, but with a G's.
Gough.
Gough.
Gough. Conner Gough. That's
Hey,
interesting.
Hey, I've got it. Go's not too bad. I've got Grouch. Group. I mean, there's just every letter of the alphabet in different places you could ever imagine. So hey, you can yell all sorts of stuff at me, and I'll usually respond.
Do you find that different areas of the countries that you go, people try to pronounce it differently, or is it just everything across the board?
Yeah, I mean, it's everything across the board at this point. So I mean, I'm never surprised anymore. Everything could be something crazy and new.
I used to work for a company, I think I can say this, but I used to work for a company called Helena, and it was Helena across the board unless you went down south, and then it was Helena. And like it was all geographical. So out west it was Helena and down south it was Helena, but where it was actually founded is pronounced Helena. And it just so I didn't know if there's a geographical aspect to Gough.
Yeah, and a lot of times with that geographical sense, you're not going to change somebody's mind either. That's just how it's pronounced.
They'll stick to it. All right, so before we move into our agenda for the evening, why don't you tell the listeners about the business, kind of the Spark Notes version of where you started, how you operate, where you're at, everything like that.
Sure. So the Spark Notes, we'll kind of go over it as quickly as I can and hit all the main points. I started Great Lakes Guided Outdoors in June of 2020 after working for a bunch of other operations across the country and kind of dabbling a little bit here and there, working with some guys back home in Michigan, and just getting familiar with the overall guiding and outfitting atmosphere. It finally just got to the point where I just had family where they were like, man, you're getting pretty good at this, and people are taking advantage of some of your services with as much as it costs you to do this. You should start, providing a service. And so I had never really thought of it that way until somebody said something. And so that kind of got the wheels turning to where, like I said, I started working with other outfits and then actually starting the company. So June 2020, we kicked things off, branded the company, built a website, that sort of thing. And then it's really just been a giant snowball effect from there to where we've been able to bring on a lot of really good help, not only on the guiding front, but also on the hospitality side of things with lodging and, cooking staff with chefs and that sort of thing, film crews. And, it's just been really, really awesome to see the growth in that realm. The direction that, most businesses anymore have taken is it is a very large importance in the business to have a good social media presence and be good with media and film stuff. So that's been really cool to be able to bring some guys on there to just be able to document not only the hunts but the overall experience. It's great for advertising, but it's even better, I think, for the memories that you're able to capture for these people that are sharing the experience. So that's like priceless for them, right? Like they can always relive those moments through that footage, which is really cool.
Yeah,
So
we've talked about that in the
so
past.
yeah. So that's kind of the direction things have headed. I mean, I spend, usually about 4 or 5 months of the year in Michigan actually guiding or running camps there. We do September and October honker hunts, and duck hunts in Michigan, and then the turkey hunts in the springtime. The rest of the year, I'm usually on the road working other places. So that's kind of the rough overview. But man alive, when I'm home, it is you keep your foot on the gas and there's no brakes involved.
Right. So when you're going outside of Michigan, how many states are you generally hitting per year?
Um, for work, I'm usually in 2 other states, sometimes 3. For travel, gosh, that's a wild card, man. I could be in almost all of them in a year if I wanted to.
That's awesome.
But yeah, the last couple years, like this past year, I spent almost 6 months or about 6 months in Florida running a charter boat in Florida in the Atlantic. We run out of Port Canaveral, which is right by Cocoa Beach. And then, right around 2, 3 months in Oklahoma, guiding waterfowl hunts with blue stem waterfowl. They've got a beautiful lodge down here. So again, providing that full experience, great meals, great hospitality, and it's just a really, really great experience overall. But the really cool thing about this job that is a little bit different than other jobs is just the networking you're able to do with, your customers or client base that opens just countless doors, nationwide and even worldwide. So getting the invitations to travel places and, go on other trips with people, you strike up a conversation that somebody wants to do such and such hunt here or there. I couldn't even start to list off the amount of hunts I've been on places that developed because we met, somewhere that I was guiding. So that's where, like I said, it's a total can of worms to where I could end up in a year for different trips too, which I'm fortunate for that.
That is pretty cool. That's awesome. We actually ended up meeting via Instagram. It was kind of funny because we had a reel that we posted about Michigan's deer problem and the deer management, and Conner, I'll say he's a literal genius because the amount of people that you wrecked in the comments on that post,
It was awesome.
but here's the caveat is like you wrecked them, but you wrecked them in like the most professional, like well-spoken way. And that to me on social media, I have a lot of respect for, because there's so many people out there that are quick to jump in and just be keyboard warriors and just spout off whatever comes to mind, and there's no context to it, there's no substance to it, and it's just garbage. And so the fact that you were able to go through and like have like full blown great arguments on Instagram was pretty impressive. And I saw that and I was like, dude, I got to meet this guy. So here we are.
Well, I think you led into that very, very well, except for the fact that I'm going to change your wording a little bit from argument to more of an educational standpoint. Man, with as busy as I am, you will not see me in a comment thread very, very often at all. Like today, I bet I made 80 or 100 phone calls, but you guys are fortunate enough that you did catch my eye, to where I was like, hey, this is something that needs some more light shined on this topic. And I feel like, it's a good conversation point. That's what I would say, better than argument. I like to strike up a conversation because I always do want to hear and feel really what other people are considering, their point to be on a topic like that. And I think that Michigan is really an underutilized resource on the deer front. And to me, it's kind of hard to see that when I can go, like I already mentioned, traveling other places. I mean, I do spend a lot of time in Ohio, Indiana, Illinois. I'll say, unfortunately, Ohio.
There you go.
Kansas, Oklahoma, Iowa, you name it, Texas, any of these states that, have the reputation for big deer being shot. And I will say there have been more mature deer being killed in Michigan in recent years, I think. However, it's not what it could be. And so, when you start seeing some stuff that's just totally off the wall, you're like, it is more of a culture problem that we have in Michigan, not necessarily a deer problem. And so that's where when I hear guys saying like, well, the DNR says, we can shoot 2 bucks or we can shoot an unrestricted tag deer with, no APRs or no inside width requirement or age requirement, whatever, it's like, yeah, just because they say that, doesn't mean that that's what's right necessarily. And I hate to do disservice to the DNR because I do know that they do a lot for, the ecosystem as a whole, but I do think that we're missing the mark there on the deer management side of things. So I'm glad we could kind of lead into that a little bit.
Yeah, I mean it's no secret that Michigan has trouble with shooting small deer. Everybody kind of makes fun of our state for it, and you look into states like Iowa and Wisconsin that holds the record for Boone and Crockett deer, and even Indiana switching. Yeah, it was Indiana that switched.
Indiana
that saw an increase in their antler size, and you have some of those bigger players in the game. But I think where we often get hung up on Michigan's deer is we live in this dichotomy between we want bigger deer, but we also have too many deer, and trying to balance out how do you kill more deer without killing smaller deer is really a tricky game to play, because when we're out chasing deer, we're looking for the maybe 10-15% percentile of buck that are out there running, and we're targeting those, and then all the doe. And then you have this mass population of maybe 30 to 40% of the herd, which are these small bucks that we're saying don't kill, that are also adding the population issues. So that's, I think, where we struggle the most, and where the other side comes with the argument saying, well, you want us to kill more deer, but you don't want us to kill small deer. How do you rationalize that?
I agree 100% with you. I think there's a couple different factors that tie into that. Ultimately, like I said, it boils down to just your education on the topic of the deer management. Let me shut my ringer off. I'm sorry about that. But it's like you have to approach the deer hunt not as like looking to just kill something. I think that's where I do have a much different mindset than a lot of people that are our age. I can go out in the woods and be perfectly content not killing anything for however long, which it's a bit of a double-edged sword. I get paid to put out results for killing things every day. But on the deer front, I think it's more important to actually oversee like the entire herd in that area and decide like, okay, like you said, there are too many, but it's like what deer is there too many of, and how can we manage that exact number without doing detriment to the long-term population. And it's like there's this little uphill hump, of let's just say 2 to 3 years, where if we were to get over that 2 to 3 year hump of not killing that, if you want to say 30 to 40% of young or small bucks, goodness gracious, you give them 2, 3 years, to get to that 4 to 5 year point, and next thing you know, there's going to be a grocery store of 4 to 5 year deer out there every year that it's like, okay, this is what we're sitting here waiting on now. I understand that it's not 10% of the population, it's probably 20% of the population, but you give it another 2 or 3 years like that, and next thing you know, there's going to still be a good population of small deer, but you aren't even going to think about shooting them anymore. But it's like just getting people past that couple year hump of, I got to fill my tag, I got to fill the freezer, I've sat out here for 2 weeks on end, or this is the first year that came in, I'm either really bored and I just got to shoot something, or like I said, this is, you only have a couple days to go. that's the mindset that's really, really hurting the management of the population as a whole, I think.
I think another thing to consider too is you only have half the population that is adding more deer to the population. Only the does are reproducing. It doesn't matter what size buck you kill. It's not going to be out there doubling the population like the doe herd will. So, if you want to keep populations in check, you manage the doe population. If you go out and shoot more doe, you're going to help manage that side of things, because it's like only, yes, one buck can go breed a few different does, but only that doe will reproduce. It's not like if you kill this buck or don't kill this buck that, you're going to see a drop in the population. You're going to see a drop in the population, the management of the population, when you shoot does. And then that gives time for the smaller bucks to grow up into larger bucks. So I think what you're saying is like that couple year hump where you see an increase in maybe the amount of smaller bucks in the woods growing into older bucks is going to be a little bit harder to handle. But it's shifting the culture, the mindset of the guy that sees the 115-inch deer that's used to seeing 90-inch deer and gets excited about it and shooting it versus the guy that, is willing to pass on a 130-inch deer because he's looking for a 150-inch deer.
Right. And that's just where the entire culture and mindset as a whole in Michigan is just so different than, like I said, Ohio, Indiana, Kansas, whatever. Because I get down here and I get guys showing me trail cam pictures of 160 and 170-inch deer, and they're like, "Yeah, that'll be a good deer, a couple years from now, or whatever." or even better yet, I have a very good friend of mine. His name's Dylan, and he would probably be a very, very good one for this show sometime. I'll have to put you in touch.
What's his last name?
Dylan Taylor. He manages a ranch. He manages a ranch in Texas. And again, I won't be able to tell it the same way that he does, but he'll send me pictures of these deer on this ranch. It's like maybe 5,000 acres, I think, or 4,000 acres. But they will literally and have been managing this ranch where they'll let these, 220 plus inch deer walk year in and year out. And they won't actually shoot them until they're like 8 or 9 years old, and at that point they're on their decline. They'll shoot them when they have 160-inch or 180-inch rack, when ultimately they were a bigger deer at one point, but now they've been able to get that influx of those genes into that population. And again, this isn't the 2 to 3 year plan. This is the 10 to 20 year plan or longer, to where they are just growing some absolute freak deer, and so that's where it's a transition from, I would be grateful to see people shooting 4-year-old deer consistently in Michigan. They're like, yeah, we just don't even shoot them till they're 8, because they did the work. They saw what happened when they did manage the population. But again, when you've got so many people on such small tracts of land, it's a recipe for disaster for deer management. But it's like at the same time, hunting's under such scrutiny. So how do you present it to these people to where you're not looking down or talking down on them, to where you start like we just talked about in the comments section? Yeah, say I go out there and just go right at their throat. Tell them, yep, you're dumb for thinking this way, which I would never say, never portray. You say it that way, and instantly their ears are shut off. Their logical thought is gone, and you're straight at their emotional appeal, where they're just fired up, not listening. And it is an argument at that point, if they even respond, and it's like, you do have to educate. So it just takes time.
I would agree with that. It's the one question that kind of floats around in my mind is it a problem that can be fixed? Because all throughout those posts and all the comments that we're reading, I've got a surprisingly large amount of people saying that it's on a legislation level, where like the tag structure in Michigan is actually built into the Michigan Constitution, which I think is not true. I thought that was odd. There's that, but then there's also people saying there's just too many hunters that you have to get on the same playing field. And Michigan has so many hunters that think the opposite way. It's a big split the room scenario. So what can be done proactively to try to take their steps in the right direction? And I'm really struggling to find that answer.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, it's going to just boil down to networking a little bit more. I mean, we as hunters do need to stand together. No matter what the topic is, with like I already mentioned, the scrutiny that hunting is under. I mean, we all know here, sitting in the pod bunker, or anybody listening, more than likely, the hunting is how we've survived for thousands and thousands of years since the beginning of time. So joining together and finding that common ground, is where you really strike up those good conversations to say, hey, we do need to be disciplined, whether it's your neighbor next door or somebody coming up from downstate hunting public land, or hunting a property that they lease, or, you know, yeah, they leased it, but like I said, who cares if you kill a deer there that year, if you can be a proponent to making it better the following year. So it's like you just have to continue to just push that narrative that, it can't be something that's going to happen overnight, because we can't rely on our DNR to fix this for us. It's just, I hate to say that, but it's not going to be fixed by the DNR. It's going to need to be something that, hey, enough of us continue to band together and keep hammering that home that it will get better if we all work together at it.
So you're saying it's coming from a place of education and people using their platforms online to communicate enough and just keep pushing it and pushing it and pushing it to where we might, one person at a time, you start to gain traction.
Absolutely, and it's going to be the ripple that turns into a wave, I think. And you're always. It doesn't matter what state you're in. Again, we look at other states that there's big bucks that get killed. There's going to be people shooting small deer there too that ultimately do inhibit the mature deer growth process. Again, you can't look down on them for their decision. You have to be happy that they're out in the woods. But that's always going to be something that will happen no matter what. You just have to continue to try to decrease that, that there's less and less of young deer, like we mentioned, getting shot. And social media is a great way. I mean, look at the impact that you've already had, and the newness of this platform, that I'm sure there's, and already actually just people from those comments section, not only do people comment, but they'll actually send you a direct message, send you a direct message, send me a direct message. And I've had guys that they might not feel like chiming in the comments, that they say, hey, you did really bring up a very good point. Do you mind explaining it a little bit further to me? Well, shoot, the door's already open at that point.
Right.
You just have to continue that right tone, that you aren't forceful, you're not derogatory. And next thing you know, they're going to be out in the woods. That little deer might come in, whatever that they would normally shoot, and they're going to think back, and they might even shoot it that first time, but they're going to think back and say, you know what, this deer could have been better than what it was.
Yeah.
They're gonna see a little ground shrinkage or whatever. And I know, like, for me, that's ultimately what it boiled down to. It's like, how many deer am I gonna kill? Because I'll be the first to say it. I mean, yeah, sure. Like, I'm a product of my culture and environment too. I did shoot younger deer at a younger age, like through grade school and high school. And again, it's like, with youth hunters, it's like, where do you draw the line? Do you try and teach them from the very beginning that, hey, this is how we're going to manage our deer herd here? That's how it is in Texas. That's how it is in Oklahoma and Kansas. A lot of these places are saying, hey, we're going to wait for a good deer. Here they are on camera. It's worth the wait. It's not like, yeah, there's a spike, screw it. There's your first deer, shoot it. Like we already talked about, there's so many does. You're telling me an 8 or 10-year-old kid isn't going to just be tickled pink to shoot a doe? I mean, I know 100% that they are. I do it every single year with the youth hunt. I take kids out and we shoot does every single year. And it's a great starting point for them, not only to learn the ethics, to learn where the food comes from, to learn to manage the buck to doe ratio a little bit. It's a great starting point for kids, instead of, hey, we're going to shoot the biggest buck of your life because they don't usually get hunted this early in the year. They haven't bred yet. They're in velvet. We're going to just kill the biggest one we can. It's like, that's also inhibiting, the genetics potential for our state to some extent. And it's like, you're literally setting these kids up for failure, because they're going to expect to do that now every single year after the youth hunt. And it's not a resource that's going to be there for them, because I hate to say it, but that they kind of helped diminish that. Not that it's their fault, but we made it okay for that to happen. And next thing you know, it's just going to continue the cycle year in and year out. And it's like, where do we draw the line?
That's a really interesting point. I feel like you've talked about this in the past as far as the
yeah,
youth hunt
I
goes.
struggle with the youth hunt because even sitting here listening to you talk about it, you know, if I think about taking my boy out there and we're sitting there watching deer and a doe walks in and 120-inch buck walks in, I'd have a really hard time telling him like, yeah, no, you can't shoot the buck.
Right.
You know, and it's like it's only 120-inch deer. You know, it is respectable in Michigan. And especially for a first deer, very respectable. And you can always level up from there. It's not like you're going to ruin it, but you're shooting that mid-range, like it's just kind of that gray area, and it's tough to say, like, you know, you can't really make regulation around it and say, you know, well, only a youth hunt can shoot doe, or only the youth hunt can shoot a minimum size deer or a maximum size. It's just kind of like, it's such a hard one. And I think it just rests on the shoulders of the dads and the moms and the mentors taking those kids out saying, hey, you can shoot that deer, and here's the consequences of that. And like, you'll get an immediate rush and excitement out of it, but down the road, you're going to want to start to think and teaching them and ingraining into them deer management. And they might not, and honestly, like, that's a sacrifice if it means that kid gets hooked on hunting, that's a sacrifice that I'm willing to see him take a shot at and drop that deer. And it's like, if that one deer means for the rest of his life he's going to be hooked on hunting and wants to go shoot more deer that are bigger and better and learn how to do it in an ethical way, well, then that to me sounds like a good return on investment. But, you know, when you take a guy out and you're teaching him how to hunt right off the bat, that's maybe getting in later in life, like all of us did. Well, second generation, we're all skip generations except for Hunter. Where we got into it later, we had somebody teach us how to hunt, and we got in with guys that, you know, really helped push us and drive us into shooting bigger deer and manage deer and getting into better deer and bow hunting for the sake of, you know, the management of the herd. And that is probably the driving factor. It's like, that's that cultural shift in all of us that, you know, the previous generation, we talk about generations a lot, but the previous generation maybe didn't teach us right off the bat, or wasn't passed down from subsistence hunting management hunting.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I just think like the biggest thing to say there is like with shooting a 2-year-old 110 or 120-inch deer, you know, you have to reset the clock, right? So it's like it was almost a good one, but we got to go back to ground zero. And instead of being 2 years, now it's going to be another 4. If you know, it doesn't get shot as a spike, it gets shot again as a 2-year-old. And then you take it from a totally different mindset from deer. It's like in the morning, we'll just say that, and maybe this is off topic, but they say in the morning, it's like you wake up never to hit your snooze because you're saying no to your dreams. So like in this case, our dream is having you know, a big mature deer or a healthy mature deer population in the whole state. We're hitting the snooze on it every single year. Like, yeah, it's okay. You know, we're enabling it to go on another year. So that's where, like I said, I don't ever want to come off like I'm sounding like, you know, I'm talking down on people trying to get kids involved in the sport, but I think we do need to start it at a young age. Like, hey, this is how we manage deer here, because that's ultimately how it got that way in other states. So that's where, at this point, that's the rules for me.
I've also found by looking, I try to do a lot of research, and especially reading through those 1,000 comments or whatever it was on that one post.
There was that many.
There was a lot. Maybe not 1,000. That might be a stretch. But reading through those comments and stuff, you start to look at profiles of people who get fired up about it and are really negative about it. And I'm not going to directly call out the demographic of people that got fired up about it, but I think most of you guys can put 2 and 2 together on who the demographic is, and it's probably because they're the ones killing the small deer.
They get a little offended by it.
I just think it's like we come back to, it's a lack of education, it's a generational disconnect. They're the ones that were taught through deer camp. All they do is they shoot with guns. and they just
Shoot the first one. That
it's
walks
brown,
out.
it's down.
Yeah.
And I think that's a huge part of the problem.
Well, honestly, I really like the point that you made with, like it's a yearly thing. So let's say a guy shoots, a 2.5-year-old. Okay, he's like, oh, next year, there'll be a bigger one. Well, no, it might take 3 or 4 years now. Like, it's a whole process that you have to think of. So instead of shooting that 2.5-year-old and maybe shooting a 3.5-year-old, you're gonna pass that 2.5-year-old, and next year he's gonna be even better, and the year after that he's gonna be even better. So it's that timeline you have to think of yeah, I might be shooting this small deer, but it's gonna wreck my chances for the next 2, maybe 3. So,
Yeah, 100%. So like even down here, I ended up had a couple days right around Thanksgiving that I ended up buying a deer license, and somebody down this way was kind enough to let me sit in one of their ladder stands. We kind of discussed prior to, like, typical just deer management is obviously their property, so I was trying to be respectful of what they wanted, and that was the rule. They're like, if it's not 150, 160 and up, let it walk. And so he texted me, partway through my sit that evening and was like, hey, what are you seeing? And I just sent him a video through the binoculars. I was watching, I don't know, probably 2.5, maybe 3.5-year-old, maybe 130s, 140, like nice buck, and I could have killed it. And I sent him the video, and all of a sudden it changed. He wasn't even in the stand with me, and he says, "Well, you need to shoot that deer." And I said, "No, like I told you, I'm not shooting that thing." And he said, "Well, there's people trespassing on this other lease over here, and if you don't kill it, they're gonna." And I said, "Well,
That's
That's
the
a
that's
Michigander.
There it is.
right."
That's the
And so
mindset.
I know he's a Michigander transplant trying to rub off on me. And I told him, I says, no, I'm not shooting that deer because yeah, sure, there's the chance that somebody else will kill it. But I'm going to tell you right now, if I shoot that deer, he is damn sure not going to be 4 years old, right? He's never going to be 5 years old. And you're right, the neighbors aren't going to shoot it because I killed it. But you gotta bet on the deer sometimes. You have to give them a chance. And then when all's said and done, when you get back to the truck at the end of the night, or back to deer camp, and you tell people, hey, here's what happened, here's what I saw, I let this deer walk. It feels good to know that you're investing in a better deer herd for tomorrow. It's like, yeah, sure, you could have killed it, felt that rush in the moment maybe, but are you going to be really tickled that you did the right thing for the longevity of that herd?
Absolutely.
Yep.
That's half that's part of the conversation I've had with people, even like locally in our office and stuff, is I always will hear the, well, if I don't shoot it, my neighbor will conversation. And I think has been probably the biggest argument, well, not argument, but like you say, education that I've tried to hammer home is like, if you don't shoot it, your neighbor will, but you not shooting it and your neighbor shooting it is way better than you shooting it and then your neighbor shooting the next small one that walks by.
Yep, you're just as bad as your neighbor if you're going to start feeding into that. Yeah.
So what is this? I guess here's the question: is what is the solution? So say for instance, the DNR all of a sudden comes out next year and says, "Hey, we're going on a 3-year doe only season."
We're hunting out of state, boys.
like would that fix things if they said the next 2 years antlerless only, no antler deer? I mean, it's never going to happen, but
No.
would that help the situation?
I personally don't think so. I mean, I still think that taking out a certain amount of bucks is healthy for a herd. I think it's just how we're doing it that's the issue.
Yeah, 100%. And I mean, at this point, I shot, I don't know, 8 or 9 does before I left Michigan this year in October alone with my bow. And years prior, I usually am hunting with block permits to help farmers and thin deer out that way. It needs to be acted on. And kudos to the DNR for the last couple of years doing the recording of data with mandatory reporting and whatnot. We finally have somewhat of an idea. Granted, not everybody's going to report like they should, I'm sure, especially the older crowd, 60, 70 and up. I mean, they never have. They still probably have the mentality that they might not ever partake in that. But either way, like, they're getting a good idea of what's being harvested, better than what we knew. We didn't have any data hardly, prior to that. So now at least we're starting to see, okay, yep, there are more bucks being killed than what there should be. smaller bucks than what there should be. So maybe, give it 2-3 years of that. We're going into year 3. They might be able to start working on something that way. But ultimately, it is going to be up to us, because even say they do mandate it that you can shoot 1 buck with 4 on a side. Will it be better than killing 2? Where you could shoot a 2-year-old 8-point and a spike? Sure. But at the end of the day, those guys that were already killing 110 and 120 inch deer are still going to be able to do that, because they've got 4 on a side. So who cares? But we have to just continue to push. Hey, we got to let these deer reach maturity and keep pushing on that way. And like you said, in a positive light, not derogatory, not in an argument. And over time, it'll continue to shift.
So do you think from a tag standpoint, is it a quality or a quantity issue? Because Michigan, you can take 2 buck every year. One has to be an APR. One is an unlimited tag. You can shoot whatever you want with it. And if you could pull a big lever right now, Conner, and say, I'm going to either limit it to 1 buck per year or limit it to 2 APR tags, which would you rather see, and which do you think is going to be more beneficial for the state?
I think a one buck tag is going to be more beneficial for sure. Reason being, I mean, yeah, sure, some smaller deer may still be getting shot, but and I guess you have to look at the statistics of how many people are filling their second tag too, right? I don't know the exact number offhand. I don't think it's very high, but it ultimately does come down to the mindset. I know 100% when you have 2 tags that you're like, well, I'm going to use my restricted, whatever 4 on a side on this 2-year-old, and I can still shoot whatever I want. Or I can shoot this spike and I still have another buck tag in case a buck comes in. And it's like you see these people that are like, oh, tagged out 5 minutes apart. I've shot this one with my rifle. It's again 110-inch deer, and then I shot this bigger one, 115-inch deer, 2 minutes later, 5 minutes later, or whatever in the same morning. And you're like, wow, you really went to work on that population for the next couple of years, didn't you? So I think one tag would be a very, very good strong start. And that's where people that are actively, working on this management. I haven't shot 2 bucks, on a tag ever, I don't think. And having that liberty to be able to use the other tag with archery for a doe, or you might even have been able to do it with a rifle this year. I can't remember. But using one of that combo buck tags for a doe with your bow, it's like we need more of that going on. We really do.
I had a thought and I lost it. It was
I hate it when that happens.
It was something really important in regards to what you were just talking about with the 1 buck tag.
Oh, I'm sorry. You were probably about to tell me to shut up. I'm off on some tangent.
No. That's what we're here. That's what we're here for.
Yeah, geez, guy, we bring you on a podcast, and all you do is talk.
What are you familiar with as far as this tag structures in other states? So Iowa, Kansas, Ohio, Illinois, Indiana. Are they all 1 buck states?
So Indiana is kind of weird. I think there's one zone that's 1 buck, and then there's another zone like in the northern part of the state that you can get another buck tag. I would have to look a little further into that. I don't know 100% how that works. I think Ohio is 1. Kansas is 1 for sure. Oklahoma, you can shoot multiple. I think it's 2. And I guess like you look at Iowa and Kansas, especially, I would put Iowa even further ahead than Kansas. They've made it almost a luxury to be able to deer hunt in their state, because they have created that healthy herd, and the mature deer where like you do have to apply for a tag. Kansas, you can generally draw within 2 years. If you don't draw your first year, you'll generally draw the second year.
You're talking for non-resident, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Yep. That's what I said, non-resident. But Iowa, goodness, I've heard of guys applying 3, 4, 5 years, and or more, and not drawing a buck tag. And it's like, not that I'm saying that you want to inhibit anyone's hunting opportunity because they can't get a tag, but by doing it that way, you really value your tag to where, there's good deer that are getting grown, and you're like, well, I might not be able to deer hunt. You get 2 sides of it. It took you 2 years to draw. You're going to kill whatever you can kill, or it took you 2 years and you're going to kill a nice deer. And I would say more people are on that second bandwagon with, I know for sure I am. When I go to Kansas, I'm like, I shot 151 and 7/8 last year with my buddy Matt down there. And we're going back this upcoming season, only because I didn't draw this past fall. But I know darn well when I get there next year, I'm not going to shoot a deer that's less than 160 or 170 inches, because I could sit all 5 days and be perfectly content with myself if I passed 10 or 20 150-inch deer. I'm just not going to shoot one, because I know that the next year when I come back, there's going to be bigger deer because I didn't shoot them when they were that young.
Man, that is a rare mindset, and it's almost hard for me to fathom how to get other people to have that mindset too. I almost feel like it's a mindset that you
show them pictures. You have to show them pictures. Look, this is what will happen 100% if we don't keep shooting these little deer. I'm telling you, and I get guys every year. They're like, well, I'm just not that familiar. Even a guy actually booked to go to Kansas with me. He's like, man, I'm really going to need help knowing what deer to shoot. I'm glad you asked. Let's talk about it. Let's look at all these trail cam pictures of deer and learn before you get in the stand and accidentally, shoot a 130-inch deer that you think is bigger than it is. And then you get it and you're like, man, I wish I would have shot a different deer. You just have to keep people around it and build them up that way. That's the only way. It's the only way. I'm telling you.
Education.
I think about from the perspective too of when you're up in a tree, like a 145 looks big when you're up in the tree, and you get that buck fever, you get that adrenaline pumping and everything like that. Especially for somebody who's newer into it, how do you make that conscious choice of to shoot or to not shoot, even if you are educated on it when you're in that moment? That's a tough spot.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, two things on that. I mean, first off, you do have to start to try and separate that emotional excitement, from the actual logical side of things. Like you said, my blood gets pumping. I want to kill everything, right? Like, yeah, sure, shoot it. This is awesome. But at the end of the day, you do have to start looking at it like, okay, I've really enjoyed, like, another good one. Jay Scott, his name is. I think he's got a couple podcasts, and I've followed him on Instagram for a long time. He posts mostly about coos deer and scoring coos deer and scoring elk and stuff of that sort. But you have to learn to decide, like, okay, they usually say, the width between the ears is what, about 16 inches or 13 inches. 13 inches outside the ears, right? That's why, like, Texas, they say their minimum inside spread's 13 inches. So you look at the deer when it looks at you, and if it's outside its ears, it's legal, which that's a toss up, because you're going to get some mature deer that do grow straight up. And what do you do? But when you can start to really separate that excitement from diving in to say, okay, how much mass does he have? What's his body look like? Is his brisket sticking out from the front of his chest? Is he real barrel chested and heavy all the way through his body, or does he get skinny at the back? Is he 3? Or is he 5? You really just have to start looking at that deer overall as a whole before you kill him. And that's where sometimes in those moments where it's like you got split seconds to decide if you're going to shoot him, sometimes you just can't take the shot, because it's like, man, you just don't know.
I think you single-handedly just cured buck fever. That's like, I've never thought about it from the perspective of if you're heavily analyzing a deer, imagine it takes your mind completely out of it. Like, if you're all of a sudden, instead of just looking at the antlers, you're looking at everything. You're like, okay, how dark are his tarsal glands? Where's his brisket at? What's his back shape? Is his belly hanging? What are his bases look like? It's brilliant. I've never even thought about that.
So just to kind of go off of that while we're on that topic, I'm going to just use that deer that I shot in Kansas last November. Not last, but 2 Novembers ago, 2022 it would have been. Matt showed me the trail cam videos. I still have them to this day, of, hey, here's the best buck that's been coming to this plot. Granted, it's the rut in Kansas. The deer range a lot. You never know what you're going to see. But this is the one that's been patterning. This is what you're looking for. So I kind of knew generally what to expect. But again, I'm not a major deer hunter. So, I mean, I would get very excited with deer like that, right? So I kid you not, the first deer on the first morning that comes up this trail is a buck. So I'm standing with my bow ready, because I'm ready to kill whatever at this point, standing up. Here comes this deer walking in. And I see him. I'm like, okay, yeah, it's a nice buck. I'm looking at him. I'm like, man, I don't know. I'm probably not going to shoot him because I could only see him from one side. And looking at him from the side, he looked pretty tight. I'm trying to, get in the frame here. But he looked pretty tight. He didn't look, like he was giant. Well, then that deer turned and looked at me, and I could see like him broadside. I could get a good grasp on his body, and then actually see his rack in its entirety and see tall brow tines, and how the size of his rack actually was. And at that point, I was like, okay, yep, the next opportunity I get to shoot him, I'm going to shoot him. But because I didn't just say, buck, 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 I'm going to kill it, and just switch to that, oh my gosh, like you said, instant buck fever. I mean, at this point, I didn't even think I was going to shoot the deer. I just thought it was another doe. So I'll look at the rack, analyze the deer, figure out what it is, and then I decide I'm either going to kill it when I get a chance or I'm not going to. And if I'm going to kill it, I'm not going to look at his rack again. I won't. I'm going to just pick a spot on the deer that I got to hit. And when I get an opportunity, that's when I'm going to shoot it. And then I'm telling you, I didn't even shake. I didn't nothing until after I made the shot. And then I remember I put my bow down and grabbed my binoculars and I was watching it run off. And I think like the transition from the bow to the binocular,
That
I was
dump.
like, oh my God. I was like, I think that's the deer, but I'm telling you, I was so hype at that point because I knew. I was like, okay, I shot the right deer. I did the right thing. You know what I mean? Where like, if I would have done that earlier, I probably would have fudged it, made a bad shot. It just, there's too many factors to mess up at that point. So I think that's always my checklist. I'm like, analyze the deer in its size. Am I going to shoot it? Okay, I am. And even it goes with does too. I mean, I don't really get too excited shooting does. I kind of just look at them as I see them running around in the package that's going in the freezer already. So I don't get too hyped. It's like I just see her as a package of burger. I'm like, yeah, okay. But same thing. Once I pick out what deer I'm going to shoot, I just start looking at, okay, where am I going to hit on the deer and when am I going to get a good ethical shot? And then that to me helps me make a better shot to where I'm not freaking out, shaking, breathing heavy, none of that. It's just, that's been helpful to me anyway.
I really, really like that. I think it's a smart aspect to take because it also makes you think twice. And I think the impulse killing is also a problem.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just that knee jerk reaction of like, just got to do it. And then 6 out of 10 times you've got ground shrinkage when you walk up to it. You're like, dang it, I let my emotions get away with me, and now I have a smaller deer than I thought.
I think that's the benefit. I think that's the benefit of especially trail cam technology, knowing what deer you have out there, patterning them, knowing which one you're going after, and recognizing like, okay, I know that deer and I'm going to shoot that deer this year because I've either watched him for a few years or I can tell by looking at him that deer is ready to go. And deciding beforehand, like I had a couple deer this year that I was watching. Had I had the opportunity, one deer was bigger than the other, but the smaller deer was older. And I looked at it and I said, that's a coal deer. He needs to come out of the herd this year because the bigger deer, the bigger rack needs to continue to go on. And pre-deciding, I had to tell myself over and over and over again, if that bigger rack comes walking in, I have to just exercise extreme discipline because I'm going to want to take him. But I already decided in my heart that is next year's deer, and I'm not going to touch him. But I do have liberty to shoot this deer this year because I already know in my heart that it is the best decision for the management of the property. Every other deer that comes walking in, I had other deer that came walking into the property that year, and I was like, I haven't seen that deer before. I'm going to have to watch him for a little bit to decide if that deer needs to go. And, when they're standing there at 15 yards broadside, just looking around without a care in the world, and you're looking at rack, you're looking at body, you're looking at everything, it's just like, I can't wholeheartedly make the decision right now saying like, yep, that's absolutely needing to go when it's kind of like on the fence. So that being said, that being able to go in ahead of time and say like, yeah, that deer's coming out this year if I get the opportunity and that one has to stay, ear tagging it in the back of your mind is a phenomenal option when you go in.
I'm going to jump in.
Do it.
I think there's a couple things wrong with just people in general. So the first thing I think is that guys or women are typically looking only at antlers when a deer comes in. And I think that's a huge problem.
Size or
because-
points? Because I hear a lot of people like we've talked about, they don't think in a term of inches, they think in the term of points. So,
8
oh,
points,
it's
10
it's an
points.
8 point, so it's okay to shoot.
Yep. And I think that's a huge issue because you could have 120 or 30 class 2.5-year-old, and you would think, oh, that's such a nice, but he's 2.5. Like, let him get to 4.5, let him get to 5.5. And probably 95% of people who say they saw a 140 or 150, that deer is probably 120 or 125. Like, they just don't know how to properly
Well, there's
score a deer.
too many variables too. If your camera's at 3.5 feet off the ground in a tree, or versus if your camera is 6 feet or 7 feet up, you're going to get different camera angles. You're going to get different viewpoints, and the 120 from a 3.5 foot camera looks like a 170.
Yeah.
I've just kind of gotten to the point where I'm always putting my cameras 8 feet up in the air, as tall as I can reach. So I know when a buck shows up on camera, I know that it's actually going to look smaller than it actually is.
Yeah. Just education. I think that's what it goes back to. It's just knowing how to do it properly. And
here's my thing though. And Conner, you can probably shed some light on this too. Everything that we're saying here, it's all coming down to education and just using platforms to get that word out and educate people. But in my gut tells me that it's going to take decades of education and pushing to actually get results.
It's a total uphill battle because how has this system been for, I mean, how old are you guys? How old am I? I mean, it's been this way for my whole life. It's been this way for my parents' whole life. It's been this way for my grandparents' life, right? Like they just, it's Michigan. This is how it is. And I guess if you look back at like old pictures of like, I just think of offhand, like the people that were driving across the Mackinac Bridge when it first opened to hunt the UP before there were wolves. And going up there, there wasn't nearly obviously the amount of hunting pressure that there is today, I don't think. But you see the size of deer. I mean, good gosh, they were shooting just some absolute giants, so it's like the genetics of this state have not changed. They're the same deer, so it is going to take a long time to continue to just, you're going to be the one odd duck out at deer camp at first. But then once people start really recognizing, people don't want to admit you're right. They never will. In any discussion, people really have a hard time taking accountability and accepting flaw. But that's where, like I said, if I can learn something from somebody in the comment section, I absolutely will, because that's how you get better at anything. But you're going to be the odd duck out for a little while, and then you're going to have two odd ducks in deer camp, and the next thing you know, you're going to have one deer camp that's practicing things. And yeah, sure, the neighbors next door probably aren't, but after a few years of bumping shoulders at the gas station and recognizing that they got that 6 point on their whatever, I don't even know what you call it, the little rack on the back of their Suburban or Ford Edge going back to Detroit, whatever. you know how many years are you going to continue to do that before you say, hey, the neighbors next door are doing it, we know that they're not going to shoot that little deer, why don't we start joining in with them? And eventually the tables will turn, but it's going to take, like you said, it will take a long time. It doesn't have to, but it's gonna.
I just wonder which platform is the most beneficial for that. Like if for some reason out of nowhere the DNR came out and just spelled out and said everything and affirmed everything that we just said, would there be more results from that because they are the powers that be, rather than just, Conner Gough and Caleb Opper and Reed Robinson, just these guys that are.
I really don't think so. I really don't think so. You know what I mean? If it's not in legislature, in writing, that this is what the law is now, I don't think so. I really don't.
Man, it's a problem. It really is, and it bums me out that so many people have the mindset about it that they do. And I guess the only thing, from what I'm hearing, the only thing to be done is just educate, educate in a good, loving, kind way. Killing them with kindness. I'll always say that.
I mean, Connor, you're a big advocate for education, which I agree with. But, if you could wave your magic wand, you'd say like, yep, go out and educate everybody. Like, I'm going to do a big news press and everybody's going to watch it. Everybody's going to know. But if you had complete power, would you start shifting stuff around in legislation and tag structures and zones and seasons? Or would you just say, nope, I want to just preach the good word and see who takes a hold of it?
I mean, man, that's a tough question because, I mean, I don't want to sound majorly controversial because as soon as you give the government an inch, they take a mile. So it's like, I wish I could say that less government interference would be the better option. But again, I don't think without that tag structure changing that anything's going to change very quickly. So yeah, I mean, in a perfect world, yeah, the DNR doesn't need to get involved, but I really don't think. I mean, there are some counties that have gone to having, multiple APR tags instead of having an unrestricted tag, and they've had very good success with that. So it's like, what we know it works. We know it works. Why don't we do it? But
do you think it's all because? Do you think it's greed and money? You think it's a money grab, and they see all the combo tags and everything as revenue streams, and if they eliminate that, you're eliminating revenue.
Sure, but at the same time, I'm going to disagree 100% with not your mentality, but their mentality, because look at Kansas, look at Iowa, look at all these places that are selling non-resident tags. You have to sell one non-resident deer tag in Kansas or Oklahoma, at whatever $300 or $500 a pop to, I guess, divide that. Let's just say Michigan, divide it by 20, isn't a deer tag $20?
Yep.
So that's 5 tags to make 100 and 25 tags to make that 500. So you have to sell one non-resident tag to every 25 resident tags sold. All of a sudden you create a culture where, we value mature deer here, and you actually create that dynamic of, sure, I don't want to turn my head at tourism and people coming in and deer hunting because I'm guilty of it going other places. I think it's a resource we share with everybody, right? Like people from Kansas are sharing their deer with me. We open that up to them too. And that's a whole nother dynamic where once you start growing big deer areas, I mean, it's just crazy. People ruin friendships over deer, but I think that's the shift that we start to take. And again, looking at, like you said, license sales and stuff like that. I mean, I'm not real big on getting into what do you want to say, conspiracies, but you hear of insurance companies and stuff that are trying to generate more tags sold to prevent deer accidents and stuff like that. It's like, is it true? Is it not? Because man, it sure seems like they're just trying to kill every deer everywhere, to try and help with that. But it's like, again, that's off the wall.
Yeah, and it's just like what we talk about, the population's going up, the amount of hunters is going down. Even locally here in the township that we live in, there's a bow hunters program for local residents, and it's great. But just the other day, I was walking down here, and the police officers are doing their annual call, and they killed 386 deer just in this township out of one park. They bait them with spotlights, and they come in and they use silencers and their sharpshooters.
Is that what they did this year? Was 386?
Last year was 386.
Holy wow.
So it's going on from today. It started yesterday till the end of February, and it pisses me off because I was talking to my wife. We were walking, and you don't know when bucks are dropping antlers. All these big bucks that I'm following right now that I have out here for years and stuff, they might drop their antlers on February 10th and then get killed by a sharpshooter on February 11th because they think it's a doe. And then all of a sudden,
even 100% with that, even like with thermal, I mean, once their velvet's gone, if they're hunting with thermals, you can't see their rack very well or at all. So yeah, I mean, that's
right. Exactly. So how can we get it in Michigan to where we're decreasing the population, but also letting the buck population thrive and eliminating the need for having to do all these calls? Because I know so many townships that are having to do these calls. Even up north, there's like where we go up north in Charlevoix County, they had to do a call this year because there's so many does, and it's just people aren't doing their part. And I think it's because of the combo tag.
Easy fix for that is just partaking in that whole deal, when they do the block permits for the most part for the farmers. Granted, I think they can do it in the wintertime too, but July and August, you're going to really be able to see what's a doe and what's not. So
the tough thing is too, though, is there's so many deer in these now that have moved into these suburban areas, like where we're at, where like the block permits really aren't going to touch them because the nearest ag block permit may be at least 5 or 6 miles away from the areas that we're in. So naturally, the bow hunters aren't doing their job, so they have to bring in the police officers to do all of these culls.
Now, is that 5 or 6 miles of city? Is that a huntable population though, even with archery, or a lot of those townships probably can't?
You can bow hunt.
That's where. Okay, I was gonna say that's where if you couldn't bow hunt there, I hate to say it, but it probably wouldn't be real applicable to what we're saying as far as the entire state. But yeah, if you can bow hunt there and they're getting shot, that's a bummer.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, it comes down to quantity of deer that one hunter can handle in a season. You gotta be careful not to incriminate anything or anybody or myself here, but what it comes down to is, one hunter can only handle so many deer a year, whether that's 2 or 3 or 4. Like if, I rarely hear of one hunter taking 4 deer in a year. It's your average Joe, usually 1 to 2. And they're like, yep, my freezer's full for the year. That's all I can handle. That's all I'm willing to pay for. But when you have a whole program, like, within this program that we're talking about, there's 80 bow hunters in the township, and they have a quota for 300 deer a year. And it's like, okay,
sure, that's 3 or 4 apiece.
Exactly. But it's like most hunters are going to take their 2 deer, and then the other 150 deer, 160 deer have to get culled. And what gets tricky is, this is a completely different can of worms, but where it gets really hard is, you want to be able to shoot more deer, but you just can't financially or time-wise handle it on the back end. So it's like, okay, if everybody picked up their piece and said like, yep, we're going to shoot all these deer, then what do we do with them? Because I can't afford to.
There are good programs in place, though, like Hunters Feeding the Hungry and things of that nature, to where, it goes hand in hand. There's so many people that are, starving families or may be struggling. I mean, let's face it, it's expensive, and meat is probably one of the highest costs at the store, right, of your groceries bill. I know it is mine, especially running a camp. I mean, good golly, you want to see my grocery bill versus my meat bill? Whew.
Yeah.
Let me tell you, I bet I'd say over 2/3 of it, a lot of weeks ends up being the protein. So yeah, I think it is a big concern, like you said, with the work involved in it or costs involved in it. But I mean, we as hunters, that's where we do need to band together and say, hey, I know if somebody's struggling to say, man, there's $100 bill at the processor to make sure this meat doesn't go to waste and can be, fed to a family that needs it. I'll put $100 in. I know anybody that, I'm not starving, and so I'm fortunate in that regard. I'm more than willing to tap in, and there's other people, that want to help. It's just a matter of finding and networking to make that happen. And even like I said, yeah, sure, I killed 7 or 8 deer with my bow this year. I had guys back in my community that, hey, our family wants to try venison this year. Could you help facilitate that? I don't want to kill one, but absolutely. Absolutely. And next year he said, I want to start, his kids are like 6 or 8. I want to start getting my kids involved in it. I never have. Oh my gosh. That's like, we're going to start the education process from scratch. Like, hey, here's how you gut a deer. Here's how you process a deer. And the entire process of management that way, that's perfect.
I just had a thought. Is 2024 going to be the year where everyone's going to snap out of it strictly because of the cost of meat? Is this going to be the year of where it's all of a sudden you're looking at $8 to $9 a pound for 80? for 80-20 burger at the grocery store, and then all of a sudden they're hearing from their friends how you can get venison for like under $3 a pound. Yeah. And everyone's going to be like, hey, I've never thought about that, but let's give it a try. Is this going to be the year where the doe population is going to get killed way more because of the amount of people that are in need or people that want it?
Gosh dang it, Joe Biden's going to solve our doe issue.
Bingo.
Oh, I hate to give that guy credit for anything, but he might do it.
At least it's something.
Hey,
Man,
there's a lot of...
I'm getting sleepy, and I might have just shit myself.
He said the JB word. Where am I?
So a lot of...
There's stairs going out of this bunker. We might make it out of here.
Guys, there's a lot of good points. If you're listening to this and you have thoughts, please reach out to Conner. Please reach out to us. Shoot us a direct message or something, because there's a problem that we have discussed, and it's on multiple different fronts. It may not just be one category, but it's like 5 or 6 different categories that are all compiling together that are making a way bigger problem. And so any ideas, stuff, at the end of the day, it's just do your part and talk to people, communicate, educate, and stuff like that. It's just, it's important, and it's detrimental to the future and success of Michigan deer hunting, I would say. So
that's right. And that's ultimately, that's what social media is for. I think it's a great networking tool, education tool. Obviously, I mean, at this point, it's a lot of entertainment for people, but if we can use it for the education and networking and discussing topics like this, that's a grand slam. Knock it out of the park. Home run.
We just keep
dinger. I'm all for it.
Just keep chipping away at it using those platforms. Conner, where can everybody find you at?
Oh goodness, I don't even know where to find me some days. No, I'm teasing. I'm Michigan_Duckman on Instagram. The business is Great Lakes Guided Outdoors, so that's pretty simple across all platforms. Great Lakes Guided Outdoors, Instagram, Facebook. We do have a TikTok now. A few videos are going up on, and then we're also doing our YouTube channel, pushing that pretty heavy. Really excited for what's to come there. We're going to have some awesome videos getting dropped, not only this spring, but through the summer and into next winter. We're going to have some major projects going on there. So stay tuned on YouTube for sure.
That's awesome.
So I think that probably covers it. I guess if anybody wants to text me, my number is 989-387-0952. Anytime, get a hold of me, call, text, Snapchat,
just putting
Facebook,
her out there.
Instagram. Yeah, Grinder, anything.
This guy's a hoot.
No joke.
Oh, I love the Midwestern that's coming out in the end here.
Oh gosh.
Well, we've talked about it too. We're really green.
About Grinder.
I was going to say we've not talked about Grinder.
No.
The only Grinder.
Untapped resource.
We're really green in the waterfowl area, and we know that is your specialty. That's your bread and butter. So our goal would be sometime when you get back to the Mitten State in the spring to get you out here, and we want to do a deep dive in the bird realm, because we really want to get more into that. So we'll link up schedules then and get you out. Guys, thanks again for tuning in to the Ataso Outdoors podcast. As always, we grow organically. So if you learned something, if you had a thought, share it with us, or share the show with somebody if you learned something. We're on Instagram at ataso.outfitters, and our website is www.atasooutfitters.com, where you can get our merchandise, which kind of helps keep this bandwagon on the tracks. Also, all of our full-length videos for the podcast are now on YouTube, so make sure to go over and check those out. There's a link tree in our Instagram bio, which will take you to all of the spots. Again, make sure to go check out Conner's page with Great Lakes Guided Outdoors, and make sure to subscribe to all his platforms and stay in touch, because hopefully in the next few months here, we will get him out to the pod bunker in person. Gentlemen, thanks for tuning in. We are adjourned.